What happened that day in the courtroom left everyone speechless. An explosive truth, an unimaginable twist, and a little girl who refused to back down. Before we dive in, I have a question for you. Do you believe that the truth always comes out in the end? If your answer is yes, comment 1 and subscribe to the channel. If you have doubts, then like this video, because what you're about to witness will change everything. And most importantly, watch until the end. Because an unexpected revelation is coming, and trust me, you're not ready for this. Elodie, can you repeat what you just said? The attorney's voice trembled between shock and fear. Just moments ago, the courtroom had been drowning in a deafening uproar. Now, dead silence. Every gaze locked onto the small girl sitting in the witness chair. Her thin legs dangled just above the floor. She clutched an old, worn-out stuffed rabbit, the only source of comfort in this storm of chaos. And then, in a voice so soft yet chillingly firm, she said, "Daddy didn't do anything, but I know who did." A cold shiver ran through the room. Gasps and horrified whispers surged like a tidal wave, threatening to swallow everything in its path. The judge's brow furrowed, her gavel hovered in midair, uncertain. Elodie's mother, sitting in the crowd, pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Tears streamed down her pale face. The defense attorney exhaled sharply, fully grasping the weight of the moment. "Elodie, can you tell us who it was?" She hesitated. Her small fingers nervously traced the ear of her stuffed rabbit, gathering the last bit of courage she had left. "Yes," but before she could utter another word, "Objection, Your Honor." The prosecutor shot up from his seat. The judge slammed her gavel down with force. "Order in the court." But injustice was boiling over. The air was electric, and the truth was hanging by a thread, teetering on the lips of a child, ready to bring down the fragile walls of a monstrous lie. Elodie's heartbeat pounded in her ears as the judge struck her gavel once more, desperately trying to restore order in the courtroom. But nothing could silence the wave of shock and outrage that had just crashed over the room. Seated at the defendant's table, Vincent, her father, slowly lifted his head. Deep, dark circles hollowed his exhausted face. His eyes, once filled with warmth and strength, were now lifeless, worn down by months of suffering and humiliation. But in this moment, as he looked at his daughter, a flicker of hope resurfaced, like a drowning man glimpsing a life raft. His wife, Claire, was paralyzed. One hand covered her mouth, the other clutched the edge of the bench as if trying to anchor herself in a world that was crumbling around her. She wanted to scream, to cry out against the injustice, but fear had tightened its grip around her throat. The prosecutor, however, forced a tense smile. His eyes narrowed as he studied Elodie, searching for any crack, any mistake that would allow him to dismiss this unexpected testimony. Then, turning sharply to the judge, his voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Your Honor, this child is impressionable. Her testimony is nothing more than an emotional fabrication." A raw, burning anger flared inside Elodie. How dare they? How could they ignore the truth? She hadn't imagined what she saw. She wasn't a puppet, manipulated by desperation. She knew what she was saying. "That's a lie," she shouted, her fists clenched. "You're not listening to me because I'm a child? You'd rather condemn an innocent man than admit you might be wrong?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom, shocked gasps, outraged whispers. The judge, visibly uncomfortable, cast a sharp glance at the prosecutor before turning to Elodie. "Miss Martin, can you clarify what you saw?" Elodie nodded, her determination unwavering. "I saw Mr. Lambert, our neighbor, near Mr. DuPont's house that night. He was fixing the security camera a few days before it mysteriously stopped working." A heavy silence fell over the room. At the back of the courtroom, an older man with a stern face paled slightly. His eyes briefly met Elodie's, then darted away. The once confident prosecutor suddenly seemed less sure of himself. "That's just a coincidence. The evidence still points to Mr. Martin." Claire could take no more. "Enough!" she burst out. "You're not even looking for the truth. You found a convenient scapegoat and refused to open your eyes." The tension reached a breaking point. The judge exhaled deeply, troubled. "We will review this new information. Court is adjourned." But the fire of injustice still burned. Claire gripped Elodie's hand, trembling. "We won't let this go." Number and justice would not win. The tension is unbearable. Will Elodie succeed in uncovering the truth? Comment justice and subscribe to find out. And tell us, would you have dared to stand up to the court? Let us know in the comments. Outraged by this injustice? Like and share this video. A shocking twist is coming. Stay until the end. And don't forget, turn on notifications. The next part is even more explosive. Elodie clutched her mother's hand as they left the courtroom, her heart still racing. A knot of frustration tightened in her throat. Her father was rotting in prison for a crime he didn't commit, while the adults in that courtroom refused to listen to the one person brave enough to tell the truth. Claire walked with quick, determined strides, her jaw clenched so tightly it ached. She wanted to scream. She wanted to slap that arrogant prosecutor who had dismissed her daughter's words as if they were nothing more than background noise. The drive home was heavy with silence, but Elodie couldn't just sit there, doing nothing. She was just a kid, but today she had learned something. No one was going to save her father, except her. That night, as her mother sat in the kitchen, quietly crying into her hands, Elodie grabbed her diary and scribbled down everything she knew. Her shaky handwriting filled the page. Mr. Lambert, broken camera, night of the attack. Why hasn't anyone questioned him? Then, suddenly, a memory surfaced. A few days after her father's arrest, she had overheard two police officers whispering outside the neighbor's house. This case feels off. Maybe, but we've got a perfect suspect. A sharp anger ignited in her chest. There was something wrong with this case, and she was going to prove it. The next day, after school, she made a decision, a dangerous one. She knew her mother wouldn't want her getting involved, but she couldn't just sit back and watch. She waited for the right moment, then told her mother she was visiting a friend. Instead, she crept toward Mr. Lambert's house. Hiding behind the fence, she spotted him in his backyard, talking to a man she didn't recognize. He looked nervous. "This is getting out of hand. I'm in danger," Lambert muttered. "Shut up. If you talk too much, we're both screwed." Elodie's breath caught in her throat. That was it. This was a setup. Her worst fears were true. Without thinking, she bolted, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to tell her mother. When she burst through the front door, Claire's eyes narrowed in concern. "Elodie, where were you?" "Mom, listen to me. I heard them. Mr. Lambert is involved." Claire's face drained of color as she saw the terror in her daughter's eyes. "Tell me everything." As Elodie recounted what she had heard, Claire didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone and called the lawyer. "We have a lead. We need to move. Fast." The truth was finally coming to light. But at what cost? Injustice is about to be exposed. But will they be ready for the fallout? Comment justice and subscribe to find out. Would you have had the courage to do what Elodie did? Tell us in the comments. Shocked by this injustice? Like and share this video. A jaw-dropping twist is coming. Stay until the end. And don't forget, turn on notifications. The next part is even more explosive. Night had fallen over the Martin household, but the tension hadn't eased. Claire drummed her fingers anxiously against the wooden kitchen table, gripping her phone tightly. Vincent's attorney was on the other end of the line, his deep voice laced with caution. "Are you certain about what your daughter heard?" "Absolutely," Claire snapped, her jaw clenched. "Lambert is hiding something. He knows the truth, and he's afraid it will come out." Across the table, Elodie sat with her fists clenched around her notebook. Frustration burned in her chest. Why was everyone moving so slowly? Her father was in prison, and the adults were too cautious, too afraid to take action. She didn't have time for this. The lawyer sighed. "I'll request that the police reopen the case, but without concrete evidence, they won't get far." "They need to interrogate Lambert," Claire insisted, but Elodie wasn't listening anymore. A plan was already forming in her mind. If the adults wouldn't act, she would. The next morning, she put her plan into motion. During recess, she slipped out of school and ran through the streets, heading straight for the lawyer's office. Her breath came in sharp gasps, but her determination never wavered. As soon as she stepped inside, the receptionist looked up, startled. "I need to see Mr. Dumas. It's urgent," she said, her eyes burning with intensity. Minutes later, the lawyer ushered her into his office, clearly intrigued by her unexpected visit. "Elodie, you shouldn't be here. Listen to me." She cut him off, slamming her notebook onto the desk. "I wrote down everything I heard. I know Lambert is involved, and he has an accomplice." Dumas flipped through the pages, his expression shifting as he read her frantic scribbles. Then, he looked up, his face pale. "Good God." He exhaled sharply. "If what you've written is true, we need to act immediately." Without hesitation, he grabbed his phone and dialed. "Commissioner, you need to send a team to Lambert's house. We have new evidence." A shiver ran down Elodie's spine, part fear, part exhilaration. It was finally happening. Hours later, the police arrived at Lambert's house. From behind a parked car, Claire and Elodie watched as officers banged on the front door. "Police, open up immediately." Silence, then footsteps, rushed, panicked. Inside, someone was running. One of the officers stepped back and kicked the door in. The lock snapped. The door flew open. Elodie held her breath. They were about to uncover the truth, but Lambert didn't surrender. Instead, he shouted something, then bolted for the backyard. "Stop him!" an officer yelled. He couldn't escape now. The walls were closing in, and the truth? It was about to explode. Lambert is on the run. The truth is coming out. But is this really the end? What do you think will happen next? Tell us in the comments. If you support Elodie, like and share this video. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next part will shock you. Stay until the end. A jaw-dropping twist is coming. Shouts echoed through the crisp morning air. Police officers sprinted after Lambert as he desperately tried to escape through the backyard. From behind a parked car, Elodie clutched her mother's arm, her heart pounding like a drum. "He can't get away, not after everything he's done," she whispered, her fists clenched. Lambert ran for his life, knocking over trash cans, frantically searching for an escape. But the officers were faster. One of them lunged, slamming him to the ground. "Let me go, you have nothing on me," Lambert roared, his face twisted in rage and panic. But it was too late. Two officers locked the handcuffs around his wrists, right there in front of the entire neighborhood. People peeked out from their windows and doorways, drawn by the commotion, watching in stunned silence. Claire stepped out from behind the car, pulling Elodie with her. Her eyes burned with fury. "How dare you! You let an innocent man rot in prison while you walked free!" she shouted, her voice shaking with emotion. Lambert turned his head toward her, his gaze dark with hatred. "You know nothing!" He spat. But he knew. He knew it was over. A police officer gripped his shoulder. "Take him in. We have a lot of questions for him." Hours later at the police station, Claire and Elodie sat in tense silence, waiting for news. Vincent's attorney stood beside them, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Then, finally, the lead detective walked in, a thick file in his hands. His expression was serious, but there was a spark of satisfaction in his eyes. "We confronted Lambert with the evidence." He exhaled. Under pressure, he cracked. He confessed to tampering with the security cameras and planting false leads to frame your husband. The room fell silent. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, overcome with emotion. "And my husband?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The detective nodded. "With this confession, we can reopen his case. We'll do everything we can to get him released as soon as possible." Elodie felt tears sting her eyes. "Papa's coming home," she whispered. The nightmare that had consumed their lives for months was finally crumbling. But deep down, a nagging fear remained. Lambert hadn't told them everything, and something inside her knew. This story wasn't over yet. What do you think happens next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you stand with Elodie, like and share this video. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next part will leave you speechless. Stay tuned, a shocking twist is coming. The relief didn't last long. Barely had the news of Lambert's confession settled when the detective's face darkened, his brows furrowed, not with satisfaction, but with concern. "We have a problem." Claire and Elodie exchanged a nervous glance. "What do you mean?" Claire asked, holding her breath. The detective placed the file on the table, tapping it anxiously. Lambert didn't act alone. He has an accomplice. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Elodie felt her stomach twist into knots. "Who?" she blurted out. The detective shook his head. "We don't know yet. But according to Lambert, this man orchestrated everything. He planted the false evidence. He gave the order to frame Vincent." Claire shot to her feet, eyes blazing with rage. "And you haven't found him yet? My husband is still in prison while the real mastermind is out there walking free?" The detective pressed his lips together. "We have a lead. But this man covered his tracks well. Lambert refused to give us his name, out of fear." Elodie's heart pounded. "Fear of what?" The detective hesitated, then spoke in a grave tone. "Lambert only said one thing. If this man finds out he talked, he won't live to see trial." A cold chill ran down Elodie's spine. The accomplice was still out there, watching, waiting, and willing to do anything to stay in the shadows. That night, darkness settled over the Martin house, but no one slept. Claire sat on the couch, gripping her phone, waiting for a call from the lawyer. Elodie, curled up on her bed, flipped through the pages of her notebook, searching, looking for something she might have missed. Then it hit her. The night she had spied on Lambert. He wasn't alone. Someone else had been there. She strained to remember, words whispered in the heat of the moment. A name. A single name. Damien. Her heart skipped a beat. She grabbed her notebook and scribbled in large letters, "Who is Damien?" The next morning, she didn't wait. "Mom!" she shouted, racing down the stairs. "Lambert mentioned someone. Damien, we have to tell the police." Claire didn't hesitate. She grabbed her keys, and within minutes they were speeding toward the station. The detective met them the moment they arrived. "Damien?" he repeated, his expression darkening. Then, without another word, he stood up, pulled out a file, and dropped it on the table. "We have a suspect by that name. Damien Roche, former associate of Lambert." He turned the computer screen toward them, revealing a photograph. Elodie froze. Her blood ran cold. She knew this man. She had seen him near her house. Horror crashed into her like a wave. Her voice came out as a whisper. "He's watching us. The case has taken a terrifying turn. Who is Damien Roche? How far will this man go to keep the truth buried?" Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you believe Elodie is onto something big, like and share this video. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next will send chills down your spine. Don't leave yet. The next twist will change everything, and you are not ready. Elodie's breath hitched as she stared at the computer screen. The face of Damien Roche glared back at her. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She had seen this man before. "He was there," she whispered. The detective's gaze sharpened. "Where? When?" Elodie swallowed hard. "Several times, outside our house, and near my school. I thought it was just a coincidence, but now..." A cold shiver ran down her spine. Claire, pale as a ghost, turned to the detective. "That means he's watching us? That he knows we're onto him?" The detective nodded, his expression grim. "More than likely. Roche knows Lambert talked, and he's probably already destroying any evidence that could lead back to him. We don't have much time." He grabbed his phone and barked into it. "Send a team to Damien Roche's last known address. Search everything. We need to take him down before he disappears." Elodie bit her lip, rage boiling inside her. This man had manipulated everyone. He had framed her father. He had destroyed their lives. She couldn't let him get away with it. Hours later, the police had surrounded Roche's apartment. Claire and Elodie sat in a parked car nearby, hearts pounding. The tension was unbearable. Then chaos erupted. A loud explosion shattered the silence. A gunshot, a flashbang, shouting, a door smashed open. "Police, don't move!" But Damien Roche wasn't giving up. A dark figure burst through a second-story window, landing hard in the alley below. "He's running!" an officer shouted. A surge of adrenaline flooded through Elodie. "He can't get away!" she gasped. Before her mother could stop her, she threw open the car door and ran. She saw him. Roche was bolting down the alley, his heavy frame cutting through the darkness. And in that moment, she knew. If he got away now, they might never catch him. So she did the only thing she could. She screamed, "Stop him!" Her voice sliced through the cold air. A police officer, alerted by her cry, burst out from a side street and tackled Roche to the ground. The man fought viciously, thrashing, kicking, but it was over. Within seconds, the cuffs snapped shut around his wrists. Elodie stood frozen, shaking. He was there, on the ground, caught. It was finally over. Claire ran to her, wrapping her in a tight embrace. "It's done," she whispered. But Elodie knew better. It wasn't over. Not until her father was free. Is it really over? Or is there still more to uncover? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. If you believe justice is finally coming, like and share this video. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next part will shake you to your core. Don't go anywhere. Because what happens next will change everything. Damien Roche's arrest didn't bring peace. That night was a nightmare. Elodie lay curled beneath her blanket, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She could hear her mother's restless footsteps pacing the hallway, waiting, praying for a call from the lawyer. The next morning, they arrived at the police station, hearts pounding. The detective met them with a grim expression. Roche hasn't said a word all night. He knows he's trapped, but he's stalling. Claire ran a trembling hand over her face. What does that mean? How much longer does Vincent have to sit in prison? The detective sighed. We have enough to reopen the case, but a confession from Roche would seal it. It would clear your husband for good. Up until now, Elodie had been silent, but suddenly she straightened. I want to talk to him. Claire and the detective both whipped their heads toward her. Absolutely not. Elodie. Claire's voice wavered. Mom, listen to me. She turned to her, eyes fierce. He knows me. He knows I uncovered the truth. Maybe he won't talk to the police, but maybe he'll talk to me. The detective hesitated. Then slowly he nodded. It's risky, but she has a point. Roche is unpredictable, but he mentioned her name during his arrest. He sees her as a key player in this story. Claire shook her head, furious. No, I refuse. She's 8 years old. But Elodie reached out, gently placing her small hand over her mother's. Mom, if it means bringing Dad home, I want to try. A heavy silence settled over the room. Then, Claire exhaled, defeated. Fine, but I'm coming with you. The detective signaled to an officer. Prep the interrogation room. Face to face with Damien Roche. Elodie sat on a cold metal chair, staring through the one-way glass. On the other side, Damien Roche. His hands were cuffed to the table. His dark eyes were fixed downward, unmoving. Then, as she walked in, he lifted his head. You... Elodie sat across from him, arms crossed. Why did you do it? Why did you send my father to prison? A bitter laugh escaped him. You really think it's that simple, kid? Your father was just a pawn in a much bigger game. Rage burned in Elodie's chest. You're hiding behind excuses. You ruined our lives. Roche squinted at her, then let out a slow, chilling laugh. So what? You think justice is going to give you what you want? Elodie's gaze hardened. Justice didn't give me anything. I took it. For the first time. Roche went silent. Then he sighed, leaning back in his chair. It doesn't matter anymore, it's over for me. He shrugged. Might as well tell you the truth. Behind the glass, the detective tensed. Lambert and I set everything up, but we didn't plan for everything. Your father ended up in the middle of it, by accident. Elodie's blood boiled. You destroyed his life for a mistake? Roche smirked. Welcome to the real world, kid. The door burst open. The detective stepped in, motioning for the officers. It's over. The cops pulled Roche up from his chair, his final words still echoing in Elodie's mind. 3 days later. The case was officially closed. Vincent was released. When Elodie saw him step out of the prison gates, she ran. Dad! He barely had time to react before she threw herself into his arms, sobbing. My girl, he whispered, breathless. Claire rushed forward, wrapping her arms around them both, They were whole again. They were free. But as they stepped into their home, a single envelope lay waiting in their mailbox. No return address, just one sentence. The truth is never what it seems. Maybe this story wasn't over after all. Is this really the end, or just the beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you believe Elodie fought for real justice, like and share this video, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Stay tuned. The next revelation will change everything. Elodie's story is more than just a fight for justice. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that even the smallest voice can shatter the walls of deception. This case reveals a fundamental truth. Justice doesn't prevail on its own. It must be fought for, defended, and carried forward by those who refuse to stay silent. In a world where people often choose to look away rather than confront uncomfortable truths, Elodie's courage shines like a beacon of hope. She was just a child, an 8-year-old girl, but her instincts, her determination, and her refusal to accept injustice changed the course of her family's fate. How many of us would have had that kind of strength in the face of overwhelming adversity? How many innocent people have been wrongfully condemned, trapped by fabricated evidence, abandoned by a failing system? This story teaches us that the fight for justice doesn't just happen in courtrooms. It begins within us, in our ability to question, observe, listen, and take action. Elodie proves that no one should underestimate their own power. Society often dismisses those who ask too many questions, who refuse to accept easy answers. But it's exactly those people who change the world. One of the most striking aspects of this story is the initial indifference of the adults toward Elodie's concerns. Her mother, overwhelmed by distress, didn't immediately see the significance of what her daughter had uncovered. The authorities, trapped in their own certainty, preferred a convenient suspect over a complicated truth. This is a warning to us all. Never take things at face value. Always challenge injustice, and most importantly, listen to those who dare to speak up. But this isn't just a story about justice. It's a testament to love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of family. Despite the storm, despite doubt and fear, Claire and Elodie never stopped fighting for Vincent. And that unwavering support, that refusal to give up, is what led them to victory. We all face moments in our lives where we must choose between silence and truth. At some point, we've all witnessed injustice, whether big or small. Elodie's story challenges us not to turn away, to stand up, to act, even when the odds seem stacked against us. So, if this story moved you, if it inspired you, share it. Share it so more people understand the power of truth. Share it as a reminder that justice should never be optional. It must be a demand. Leave a comment below. Have you ever witnessed an injustice? How did you react? And most importantly, subscribe for more powerful stories of courage, resilience, and justice. Together, we can make our voices heard. Because sometimes a single word, a single voice can change everything.